The air in Tariq al-Jamil's penthouse was like the air in a vault. Cold, still, and smelling faintly of money and glass cleaner. From his vantage point on the 70th floor, the city below was a silent, sprawling circuit board, a network of assets and liabilities he commanded with the tap of a screen. Dressed in an immaculate white thobe, the red and white checkered keffiyeh on his head held in place by a stark black agal, he paced the length of the floor-to-ceiling window. The phone pressed to his ear was a conduit for a billion-dollar merger. His voice a low, dispassionate instrument that signed digital death warrants for one company and breathed life into another. He saw the world in percentages, in profit margins, in territories to be conquered. Humanity was a variable to be managed, not felt. In the corner of the vast, minimalist living space, his mother, Halima, sat in her wheelchair, a fragile, silent figure wrapped in a dark blue shawl. Her gaze was fixed on the same cityscape, but she saw not a balance sheet, but a lonely constellation of distant lights. Her world had shrunk to this glass box, her memories the only landscape she could truly navigate. A new maid, an American girl named Clara, moved with quiet efficiency in the background. At 21, she possessed a solemnity that belied her years, her movements precise as she polished a chrome sculpture that had never known a human touch. She was a ghost in the machinery of Tariq's life, another seamless, silent service he paid for, and he had not yet bothered to learn her name. He ended his call with a curt finality, the silence rushing back in to fill the void. He glanced at his mother, a flicker of duty crossing his features. "Are you comfortable, Ummi?" he asked, the words formal, rehearsed. Halima simply nodded, her eyes not leaving the window, and the chasm between them felt as wide and as deep as the sky outside. Delilah swept into the penthouse not like a person, but like a weather system. She was a whirlwind of expensive perfume, rustling silk, and imperious commands. Her voice, sharp and glittering as the diamonds on her fingers, sliced through the curated silence. "This will not do. The flowers are all wrong. I said peonies, not these funereal things," she announced to the empty air, gesturing dismissively at a vase of perfect white lilies. Tariq, who had been reviewing market projections, looked up and smiled. To him, Delilah was the ultimate acquisition, a beautiful, polished asset that confirmed his status. Her high-maintenance demands were not flaws, but features of a luxury brand. He was oblivious to the way her eyes, cold as polished stones, swept over the room, assessing everything for its value and dismissing anything or anyone that fell short. She barely acknowledged Halima, offering a tight, artificial smile in the direction of the wheelchair before turning her attention to Clara. "You, the new girl," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "My bags are in the hall. Be careful with the blue one." It's Crocodile Clara, who had been straightening a cushion, simply nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, her voice soft but clear. Delilah watched her go, a sneer playing on her lips. She walked over to Tariq, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Darling, we must do something about the decor before the engagement party. So sterile. And we need to discuss your mother. Perhaps she would be more comfortable in her room that evening? She wouldn't want to be bothered by all the noise." Tariq, caught in her embrace, nodded absently. "Whatever you think is best, my love." He did not see the flicker of pain in his mother's eyes, nor the way Clara, returning from the hall, paused for a fraction of a second, her hands tightening on the handle of the expensive luggage. Days bled into one another, each marked by the same sterile opulence. Yet, within the cold heart of the penthouse, a small, quiet warmth began to kindle. It happened in stolen moments, away from the demanding presence of Delilah and the oblivious gaze of Tariq. One afternoon, Clara noticed Halima shivering slightly, the air conditioning a constant, Arctic hum. Without a word, she retrieved a soft, cashmere blanket from a linen closet and gently draped it over the elderly woman's shoulders. Halima looked up, her dark, tired eyes meeting Clara's. For the first time, she offered a genuine, fragile smile. "Thank you, my dear," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. You have kind hands. Clara felt a blush rise to her cheeks. It's nothing, ma'am, but it was something. It was an acknowledgement. Another day, Clara found Halima struggling to turn the page of a heavy, leather-bound book of poetry. Her gnarled, arthritic fingers couldn't quite grasp the thin paper. Clara knelt by the wheelchair. "May I?" she asked softly. Halima nodded. Clara carefully turned the page, her touch gentle. "My husband used to read this to me," Halima said, her voice distant with memory. "He had a voice like warm honey. He believed a home wasn't built of marble, but of kindness." Clara listened, her heart aching with a strange mix of sadness and reverence. She began to make a point of checking on Halima throughout the day, bringing her a warm cup of herbal tea, adjusting her position to give her a better view of the sunset, or simply sitting in silence with her for a few minutes. Halima, in turn, began to emerge from her shell, sharing small fragments of her past, stories of a life filled with love and laughter, a life starkly different from the gilded cage she now inhabited. These quiet interludes became a secret garden in the desert of the penthouse, a testament to a connection that needed no language of wealth or power. The impending engagement party loomed over the apartment like a gathering storm. Delilah grew more volatile with each passing day, her perfectionism curdling into a constant, simmering rage. The penthouse became a battlefield of her whims. Florists were fired, caterers were berated, and the household staff walked on eggshells, their faces etched with anxiety. Clara bore the brunt of much of it, enduring sharp rebukes for dust motes only Delilah could see and for arranging silver that was a millimeter out of place. Through it all, she remained poised, her calm exterior a dam holding back a flood of resentment. Her primary concern was Halima, who seemed to shrink further into herself with every one of Delilah's outbursts. Delilah began to treat the elderly woman not as a person, but as an inconvenient piece of furniture. "Honestly, must she sit here?" she'd complained to Tariq over the phone. "She clashes with the new color scheme." One afternoon, while finalizing the guest list, Delilah grew frustrated. "This is impossible. There's no room for the Al Sultan delegation." She paced furiously, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Her eyes landed on Halima, who was quietly watching the clouds drift by. "It's this corner," Delilah muttered, more to herself than anyone. "It's dead space." She walked over to the wheelchair. "We're going to have to move you. The catering needs this area for a champagne fountain." Halima looked at her, her expression weary but her voice steady. "This is my home, Delilah." The quiet dignity in her tone only served to infuriate Delilah further. "It is my home now," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "And you are just a part of the inventory." Clara, polishing a glass nearby, froze. The glass grew cold in her hand as a chill of pure fury shot through her. The breaking point arrived with the force of a lightning strike. It was the day before the party, and the penthouse was a chaotic swirl of deliveries and frantic preparations. Delilah, a tyrant in a silk pantsuit, was directing the placement of a towering, abstract ice sculpture. She wanted it moved a foot to the left, then 2 feet to the right, her commands growing sharper and more irrational. The workmen, sweating under the pressure, struggled with the heavy, frozen mass. In the midst of this chaos, Halima had asked Clara to wheel her to the balcony doorway to get some fresh air. They were positioned near a large, porcelain vase filled with imported orchids, a piece Delilah had chosen herself. As the workmen maneuvered the sculpture, one of them brushed against the pedestal holding the vase. It wobbled precariously. "Watch it, you imbeciles!" Delilah shrieked, but it was too late. The vase tipped, crashing to the marble floor in an explosion of white porcelain and shattered flowers. Silence fell. Delilah's face went white with fury, then blotched red. Her rage, searching for a target, bypassed the clumsy workman and landed squarely on the most vulnerable person in the room. She whirled around to face Halima. "You! This is your fault!" she screamed, her voice shaking. "You are always in the way. Always." Halima flinched, her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair. "I did nothing," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare talk back to me," Delilah spat. She stormed over to the wheelchair, her beautiful face twisted into an ugly mask of contempt. "You are a useless old woman," and then, in a fit of pique that defied all reason and decency, she raised her hand and slapped Halima's frail, wrinkled hand as it rested on the armrest. The sound was small, a sharp, ugly crack in the stunned silence, but its impact was monumental. Clara had been arranging canapés on a silver tray across the room. The moment the porcelain shattered, her head had snapped up. She watched Delilah's rage build, her body tensing as the woman advanced on Halima. She saw the fear in the old woman's eyes, the way she tried to make herself smaller. And then she saw the slap. For Clara, the world narrowed to that single, brutal act of cruelty. The silver tray clattered to the floor, forgotten. In two long, furious strides, she crossed the room. The quiet, deferential maid was gone, replaced by a fierce protector. She reached the wheelchair just as Delilah was raising her hand again, her face contorted with rage. Clara grabbed Delilah's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't," she said, her voice low and shaking with a dangerous intensity. "You touch her." Again Delilah, shocked by the physical intervention from a mere servant, tried to wrench her arm free. "How dare you? Let go of me," she shrieked. But Clara held fast, her eyes blazing with a righteous fire that Delilah had never seen. She pushed Delilah back, putting herself squarely between the aggressor and the wheelchair, a human shield for the terrified woman behind her. "Get away from her," Clara yelled, her voice ringing through the cavernous room. At that precise, volatile moment, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Tariq al-Jamil, home early to appease his fiancée about some party detail, stepped into the foyer. He froze, his gaze taking in the tableau before him. His fiancée, disheveled and screaming. His mother, cowering in her wheelchair, and the new American maid, standing over them both, her body radiating an aggression he couldn't comprehend. The scene was inexplicable, a violation of the ordered, sterile world he had so carefully constructed. His business mind saw only chaos, a problem to be swiftly and ruthlessly solved. "What is the meaning of this?" Tariq's voice was like ice, cutting through the tension. Delilah, seizing the opportunity, immediately collapsed into the role of the victim. Tears, instant and theatrical, streamed down her face. "Tariq, thank God. This maniac attacked me," she sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at Clara. "She assaulted me. For no reason. I was just trying to move your mother out of the way of the broken glass, and she just flew at me." The workmen, eager to avoid blame, averted their eyes and began sweeping up the porcelain shards with renewed vigor. Tariq's gaze fell on Clara. His eyes narrowed with suspicion and anger. The evidence seemed clear. His maid had physically accosted his fiancée. "You," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Explain yourself." Now Clara stood her ground, though a tremor ran through her. She looked from Tariq's cold, unforgiving face to Halima's frightened one. She took a deep breath. "She hit your mother?" Clara said, her voice clear and unwavering, despite the fear constricting her throat. She was screaming at her, and she slapped her hand. "I saw it." Delilah let out a gasp of manufactured outrage. "She's lying. Why would I ever do such a thing? She's trying to get me in trouble. Tariq, you must fire her. Call security. I want her arrested." Tariq felt a headache forming behind his temples. It was a simple problem of human resources. An employee had overstepped. The solution was termination. And yet he hesitated. There was something in Clara's unflinching gaze that felt true. And there was something in his mother's silence, a profound and terrifying quiet, that was far more damning than any accusation. For the first time, he looked past the surface of the scene and felt a deep, unsettling uncertainty. He made a decision. "Everyone out," he commanded the staff and workmen. Then he turned to the two women. "Delilah, go to our room. I will deal with this." He finally looked at Clara. "You will wait here." After Delilah had stormed off, her sobs conveniently subsiding the moment she was out of view, Tariq knelt beside his mother's wheelchair. The vast, silent room felt like a courtroom. He looked at Halima's face, truly looked at it, for the first time in what felt like years. He saw the deep lines of sorrow etched around her eyes, the slight tremble of her lower lip she was trying so desperately to control. He saw the faint red mark on the back of her hand. "Ami," he said, his voice softer now, stripped of its corporate authority. "Tell me what happened." The truth, for a long moment. Halima remained silent, her gaze fixed on her lap. She had spent years swallowing her pain, hiding Delilah's casual cruelties to protect her son's happiness, to avoid being a burden. But the raw, fierce loyalty of a near stranger had broken through her resolve. She slowly raised her head, and the look in her eyes made Tariq's heart clench. "She is not a kind person, Tariq," Halima whispered, her voice fragile. "She resents my presence here. She calls me inventory. Today, she was angry about the vase, and she struck me." The simple, unadorned statement landed like a physical blow. Tariq felt the air leave his lungs. It wasn't just the slap. It was the pattern of disrespect, the casual dehumanization that he, in his willful blindness, had allowed to fester in his own home. Halima reached a trembling hand into a small bag that hung from her chair and pulled out a worn, creased photograph. It was of a younger Tariq standing beside his father, a man with a kind, open face, dressed in simple, functional clothes. "Your father," Halima said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "He never had much money, but his wealth was in his heart. He would always say, 'A man is measured by how he treats those who can do nothing for him.'" Tariq took the photograph. The memory of his father's words, long buried under years of ambition and acquisition, rose to the surface, and he felt a profound, gut-wrenching shame. The photograph felt heavy in his hand, an artifact from a life he had forgotten how to live. His father's smiling face was a silent judgment. He had built an empire of glass and steel but had allowed its foundation, his own family, his own honor, to crumble from neglect. The cold fury that settled in his chest was not the calculated anger of a boardroom negotiation. It was a deep, personal rage directed at Delilah, but also at himself. He placed the photo gently back in his mother's hand, his touch now full of a reverence he hadn't shown in years. He stood up, his posture transformed. The detached billionaire was gone, replaced by a son whose duty had finally become clear. He walked toward the master suite, his thobe whispering against the marble floors. He found Delilah on the phone with her jeweler, complaining about the fit of a new diamond bracelet. She looked up as he entered, her face arranged in a mask of tear-stained grievance. "Tariq, have you called the police? That girl needs to be—" He cut her off, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. "The engagement is over, Delilah." She stared at him, her mouth falling open. What are you talking about? Is this because of that lying maid?" "This is because of you," he said, his voice lethally quiet. "I heard what you called my mother. I know what you did. Not just today, but all the other times you thought no one was watching." Delilah's facade of the wronged victim shattered instantly, revealing the raw, ugly greed beneath. "Your mother? That senile old woman? She's a relic. I was doing you a favor, trying to modernize your life. This is what I get for trying to build a world for us." Her words were poison, but they no longer had any effect on him. He saw her clearly now, a hollow, grasping creature, utterly devoid of the kindness his father had prized above all else. "You built nothing," Tariq stated. "You only sought to acquire. My world does not have a place for you in it. Pack your things. My security will escort you out." He turned and walked away, not looking back, the sound of her ensuing tirade of curses and threats fading behind him like meaningless static. An hour later, the penthouse was quiet again. The last vestiges of Delilah's cloying perfume had been erased by the clean, evening air flowing through the open balcony doors. The ice sculpture was gone, the shattered porcelain swept away. It was a different kind of silence now. Not the sterile emptiness from before, but a peaceful stillness, full of unspoken relief. Tariq found Clara in her small, neat staff quarters, a single suitcase open on her bed. She was carefully folding her modest uniform, her movements resigned. She looked up as he entered, her expression wary, expecting the final blow of her dismissal. Tarek stood in the doorway, a towering figure in his white robes, yet he had never felt so humbled. "I am sorry," he said, the words feeling foreign but necessary on his tongue. "For what you endured. For what I failed to see." Clara paused her packing, her gaze searching his. "She should not have treated your mother that way," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "No," Tarek agreed. "She shouldn't have. You showed more loyalty and honor in 5 minutes than she showed in 2 years. You protected my family when I did not." He took a step into the room. "Please don't leave. I was wrong." He cleared his throat, shifting from a personal apology to a formal proposal. "I would like to offer you a new position, not as a maid. I want you to be my mother's official companion and caregiver. You would answer to no one but me. Your salary will be tripled. You will be treated not as staff, but as a respected member of this household." Clara stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She looked past him, through the doorway, and saw Halima sitting in her wheelchair in the living room, bathed in the warm glow of a lamp, a look of serene hope on her face. A slow smile spread across Clara's face. "I would like that very much, Mr. Al-Jamil." The final scene settled like a peaceful dusk. Tarek was no longer pacing by the window but was seated on a low ottoman beside his mother's wheelchair, listening intently as she recounted a story about his father. He was finally home. Clara entered the room carrying a tray with 3 cups of steaming mint tea, her presence no longer invisible, but essential. She set the tray down, a welcome and integral part of their small, newly formed family, the warmth of the tea mingling with the newfound warmth that finally filled the cold, empty spaces of the penthouse.